am thrilled this afternoon to be welcoming home one of our very own, Robyn Chase. Robyn is a 1986 graduate of MIT Sloan and a great example of the entrepreneurial spirit of our students and our alumni, and especially this sort of wonderful combination of combining entrepreneurship with sustainability. Robyn is the founder and CEO of Buzzcar, a service that brings together car owners and drivers in a car-sharing marketplace. She is also the founder and former CEO of Zipcar, the largest car-sharing company in the world, and GoLoco, an online ride-sharing community. GoLoco was actually an S-Lab project about 5-6 years ago. And through these efforts, the variety of different efforts that Robyn has been engaged in, she has actually been credited with making not owning a car a very cool thing. Robyn was listed as one of Time's 100 most influential people in 2009, Businessweek's top 10 designers, and Fast Company's Fast 50 Champions of Innovation. She has also received the Massachusetts Governor's Award for Entrepreneurial Spirit, Startup Woman of the Year. Now, her eldest daughter jokes that in her world, or her world lens, is quite predictable. Probably all of our adolescent children think that parents' lens are predictable, but the daughter basically argues is that everything comes back to climate change, making better use of resources, i.e. sharing, and innovation as an engine to our future prosperity. And this focus on how to actually combine innovation, entrepreneurship, and sustainability to rebuild a future that is just, that is sustainable, and that is also prosperous, is one of the big things that I think Robyn has actually been trying to promote through her work and through her leadership. And I would say the most recent example is that Robyn, who recently has moved back to New York from Paris, saw the devastation that happened in the wake of Superstorm Sandy, including that there were suddenly hundreds of families, if not thousands, without homes. And what Robyn instantly started doing is trying to figure out a sort of web-based marketplace that could actually link together people in need of homes with people who have availability to try to tackle again, through a very cool way, this very pressing problem. Please join me in welcoming Robyn Chase to our series.
It's a pleasure to be here. I do feel like I'm home. And what I decided I wanted to share with you guys today is a basis for optimism and what I've been thinking about for a long time. So I'm going to take you through the path of this thinking and how it ends up in a good place, because in fact, I do think climate change and sustainability is something to be depressed about and something therefore we have to act on. So I was talking with John Sturman about whether we want to instill horror and pessimism or optimism in our audiences. So I'm going for optimism today, but that's because I have extreme horror in the behind. So Zipcar, one of the reasons that Zipcar worked and why we founded it was I was thinking about the excess capacity of car ownership for those of us who live in cities. So we live in a city, yet we don't need a car, most of us 5 days a week, because we're getting to work without a car. Yet our choices were own a car or not own a car. Those aren't very good choices. So Zipcar really succeeded that it changed the economics that I could have access to 10% or 12% of a car, and we could amass all those people who wanted small percentages of car use onto one. And that really is one of the reasons why Zipcar works so beautifully. What ended up happening is I see actually that I'm worried that my slides might have some real gaps. So one of the things that Zipcar ended up doing, though, was it really transformed a whole bunch of major industries. That the way car ownership is now, all the car major manufacturers have been doing a lot of talking and are fearful what's going to happen with their industry. And I've just been spending the last 2 years in Europe, and I want to say it's a de facto known thing there that cities will only have shared cars. And and what are we going to do about that? And I'd say around the world, all the OEMs are kind of terrified about what's going to happen with their sales figures. And Asia will not be helping them as much as they hope. And the car rental industry, also likewise, we took a 24-hour bundle that was a minimum rental period, and we broke it down into smaller and smaller pieces. So we transformed that. And the whole collaborative consumption, I don't know what to call it, trend idea really comes from Zipcar as its root, that we think about we can have access to things without having to own them. So we really changed the way things are going. And when I look at this change, what it really comes back to me, why Zipcar was successful, was this idea of excess capacity and a platform for participation, that we enabled all the people to become members because we created this common platform and these common individual cars that people could use. And I joke how sitting at a cafe 12 years ago when my co-founder came to me with the idea of car sharing, that the light bulb went on over my head, and I said, this is what the internet is made for, sharing very discrete, particular resources very easily among lots of dispersed people. So excess capacity plus platform for participation feels to me a really important thought. And I want you guys to start thinking about this idea of excess capacity, because it is an incredible resource for so many great innovations. And I think I have some examples. So the whole open data movement, that was saying the MBTA or the city government or a company collected this data for itself for one purpose, and it was happy to pay for that purpose, and it suited its purpose, it collected the data, but by opening it up, it turns out there's this huge amount of value that exists out there that remains to be captured. And what's really fabulous about working with excess capacity is that we now have transformed the economics, because the asset was built and bought for this kind of killer app, and now we don't have to rebuy that asset. So as innovators, and I give a lot of talks, and so not just innovators, but big companies and big governments should be looking at their excess capacity and thinking, how can we repurpose this? How can we get more value out of it? Another example I adore, Skype. So if you think about Skype as a telecommunications company, and what was it built off of? Robyn's computer with Robyn's video camera and Robyn's internet connection. And so they were able to build, I think they're 9 years old now, 632 million users, a telecommunications company without any hard assets. It's really a kind of phenomenal thing. I was talking to Cisco recently, and Cisco was very proud to tell me their example, that they had they created a data lending library, equipment lending library, and before each individual researcher and each individual scientist and each individual lab, and actually this is for MIT, you guys should be doing this, someone listening in the room, they put all of that into this virtual lending library, and so each different lab doesn't have to buy its own equipment, and there were these really fabulous unexpected, unanticipated benefits. And if I were giving a different talk and a longer talk, I would tell you that sharing delivers a huge number of unanticipated benefits. But for them, one interesting thing is if you think of a piece of equipment as having now a path of who used it before. So when you're using that piece of equipment and it's not doing what you expect it to do, you can go back and see who used it before, and they can tell you, oh, well, I jiggled that wire and it worked well. This is Robyn, the non-engineer, talking. or we can imagine that you can now meet your people who you should be collaborating with or who clearly have your same interest because you're seeing who's been using, which other labs have been using it. So Cisco has been doing this. The iPhone for me, the smartphones, is the ultimate in excess capacity. When we had the single-purpose device of just my phone, which I bought for $300 or $400, I was using it 15 minutes a day. When it was wrenched open, not Steve Jobs not being clever, we have to remember he wasn't always clever, that he was a very closed person, but it was wrenched open from him, and now it became this amazing platform for participation with this incredible excess capacity. So I bought my iPhone for its one purpose of making phone calls, and I spent my money on that, and now we have 750,000 apps over the last 4 years. Completely unscientifically, I want to say it's probably one of the highest paces of innovation we've seen anywhere. 4 years, all these apps. Really, really stupid apps, which is completely fine. because you didn't have to. That's the whole point of innovation. Some are bad, and some really incredibly fabulous, one-of killer apps for which you would actually buy the device also. So this idea of excess capacity is just one piece of what I want to communicate to you guys today, and really, really think broadly and hard about that as innovators. So temporally, here's another example. In Bogota, Colombia, they shut down all the roads on 130 kilometers of roads on Sundays from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. because there aren't very many people driving, if we think of Star Mem Drive, but at a much larger scale, so that they closed it to motorized transportation and opened it to unmotorized. 1.1 million people use that 130 kilometers every single Sunday. It's an enormous success, and I want to say that was excess capacity. They didn't have to build 130 kilometers of cycle paths and pedestrian paths. They had it, they opened it, very low cost. So this economic logic, if you think about it, why is it fabulous? Because you don't have to source and evaluate, purchase, maintain, finance. I mean, this is really effortful stuff that actually, as you go to business school and then later, it's your jobs, but it's really hard work. When you put it on a common platform, it means that it's suddenly scalable. As I said, you can do this online and search really simply and transactions. It delivers this really distributed network. If you think of distributed networks are incredibly robust and resilient. And what I, of course, like about it is created by the community. And then the environmental logic back to this. When we're talking about physical assets, we now are getting much, much better use of those physical assets, that we're really using them up. And it enables this collaborative economy and dematerialization of stuff that we're seeing with Zipcar and the service economy. So this, I just wanted to sit on excess capacity for a minute, but now I want to share with you a new organizational structure that I think is really transforming our world and is one type of excess capacity, and in particular, the excess capacity of individuals. So I want to start with having you think about my favorite word, sharing, and in particular, bed sharing. So get in your mind, bed sharing, got it? So you guys are completely going to the wrong spot. The type of bed sharing I'm talking about is me going to my neighbor's house when I come to Boston and staying, and I see my neighbor in the audience, and he very kindly has extra spare bedroom, and I get to stay in his spare bedroom. And if I'm kind of lucky, I'll have a nice, cleanish, single bed spare bedroom when I travel around, and if I'm really lucky, I have a nice double bed spare bedroom. If I'm unlucky, I'll be having the teenager who just got moved, and I'm having to sleep in the dirty sheets and look at the walls. And this is why, in fact, why we invented hotels. And so hotels are, in fact, bed sharing. And when I was launching Zipcar, my staff all wanted to call it car sharing. And A, no one knew what car sharing was. But B, car sharing has when we think of sharing, we're thinking, oh, I'm going to have to wait my turn. It's going to be kind of crummy and dirty. And I would say to them, imagine if we called hotels bed sharing, because that is effectively exactly what they are, is bed sharing. So you can just see across the street, Marriott, bed sharing. Kind of completely transforms what you think about. So I went out and I went and did a little bit of research to find out what are the largest bed sharing companies in the world. And the Intercontinental Hotel Group, 60 years old, an amazing 645,000 bedrooms in 100 countries. And just to remind you, and we can look at Hilton too, after 93 years in 88 countries, 610,000. So remind you the level of effort that took, that you had to say to yourself, okay, I want to start a hotel, and I'm going to build it here, and now I have to plan it, and I have to go finance it, and then I'm going to have to maintain it, and then I'm going to make some hotels will be great and some won't, and I have to get a return on investment each one of those, and there's going to be hurricanes, and I'm going to have chosen the wrong spot. And over all this time and all this effort, Intercontinental Hotel Group, look at them, 60 years, an amazingly big hotel, bed sharing space. But of course, are you guys guessing? Hopefully, part of you guys are. Airbnb is, in fact, a much, much larger bed sharing. And after 4 years, they have 650,000 rooms in 192 countries. Like, I want you to pause for a minute and think, unbelievable what is going on here. This is really unbelievable. This really changes a lot of things, changes almost everything. And we have couch surfing, which isn't exactly the same, because couch surfing, there's no money transacting, but 8 years, 1.5 million beds to share. And they had theirs at 232 countries, but as someone pointed out to me, there aren't 232 countries, so I just rounded it down, 200. But if we look here, Airbnb, I've had to swap this slide out because in the last 6 months, they now have had 10 million beds booked. It's really remarkable what's happening here. And so I look and I think, okay, is this excess capacity of individuals in their houses on a platform for participation? Yes. And some people call it peer-to-peer, and I think peer-to-peer, well, you know what's also peer-to-peer is the bake sale at your elementary school. And if we call it just peer-to-peer, it's saying that eBay is the same thing as a yard sale, or Etsy is the same thing as a craft fair. So peer-to-peer for me is not doing it. It's not really explaining what's going on. And then, of course, we want to say the huge power of a free and open internet. It's because of the internet that this stuff is happening. And I'm also hoping that some of you guys understand the code words when I say free and open internet, a subject for another big conversation. But don't forget the internet is not free and open, and we're about to lose it in the next month. So free and open internet and the power of capitalism. So there is this huge force, but I still don't think it's the whole story. As I've been thinking about it, what I really see happening is I want to call it, so there's excess capacity in the platform for participation. All of these companies are, in fact, part of that excess capacity and platform for participation. So we've talked and talked and talked over the last 10 years about Google and Facebook and YouTube and all these things. But if you look at them, it's my stuff on these that are making these companies work. So YouTube, you know, it's my videos. And Google, without my searches and my links, how would they know what to put to the top? You know, eBay, my stuff. It is all of these things. And then I want to call it Peers Incorporated. And so now I'll tell you what I'm thinking Peers Incorporated is, because for me, this is the additional secret sauce going on here. Peers Incorporated is a partnership between companies and individuals where each side is doing what it does best. And it's a kind of value share. So the company side, companies are providing the amazing economies of scale, everything about industrialization that we love, getting the economies of scale, the company side can provide. If we think of companies are also they're places where we have many kinds of intelligence brought to bear, whereas Robyn can only have one kind of intelligence, and maybe I'm extra clever, I have two kinds, but I can't have as many as a company. Significant and prolonged resource investment. That's what companies do fabulously well. We as individuals typically give up. I've been working on Buzzcar, which is peer-to-peer car sharing, and it's taken me almost 5 years to get insurance in the United States. No individual is ever going to spend 5 years doing something like that. And importantly, standards, rules, and recourse. If we think of Airbnb, it's not 650,000 B&Bs. That's not that interesting. What's going on is there's a common standard, rules, and recourse bound up in the brand promise. And that's what the company side does. So what do the peers do? The peers do all the stuff that is really expensive for individuals, really expensive for companies. So they provide an amazing diversity of stuff. And again, when you go and look at Airbnb, the number and shapes and sizes of those things is really phenomenal. And we as individuals provide localization, customization, and specialization, all these things that's really expensive for a company to do. Industrialization and the industrial economy was all about standardization. And now we have this method by which we can have both sides of the thing happening simultaneously. Social networks. Which big company is not dying to pry into your social networks? Well, when it's me and my stuff, it's my friends, it's my social networks. I'm not prying into it. It's what I have access to commonly. And then there's this really amazing power of innovation. And I think I'll be talking about that point a little bit later. And so this Peers Incorporated, you can see how these two things are fitting together. Each side is delivering what it does best. What's really, really nice about this Peers Incorporated model is its ability to scale, because once you get this platform right, you can move really fast. And two, this platform, it is non-trivial. So if you compare, let me go black here for a minute. Oop, wrong one, black. So if you think about Google Video versus YouTube, why in heck would two guys, YouTube, beat out Google Video? And it's because they managed to make that platform better. When I was giving this talk in June, or part of this talk in June, a person was telling me that specifically, I used to guess and say, maybe it's they put the share button a little brighter yellow to the right, so it was really good for people. But in fact, what they did was the ability to upload videos and lots of different kinds of video formats was what they did way better than Google Video, and that's why they won. So when we think about this peers incorporated model, you have the producers and consumer side of things, and you have to get both sides right, and it is really not easy. But once you get that platform right, everyone can add their stuff, and I want to say that the term collaborative consumption, in fact, is a term I coined and I don't really like, because now if we think about collaborative consumption, what's really happening is I want to say it's parallel. It's in parallel all together, Zoom, it can happen. So Airbnb, the guys aren't having to collaborate. They're just all at once, simultaneously can be putting their stuff onto these platforms. You get amazing scale. So here, carpooling.com is the largest ride-sharing company in the world. It's German. Every single month, they move 1 million people, which is the same as moving 2,500 high-speed rail trains, and they didn't have to build a track or buy a train car. And so huge movement happening. Fiverr, do you guys know Fiverr.com? So Fiverr is what would you do for $5? And I met the CEOs after, when he was only 3 weeks old, and he already had 65,000 people who had done gigs. And now they have this 800,000. And when you're bored sometime, go look and see what you can buy for $5. And if you need some really amazing marketing stuff, go look. So you can see this amazing speed. Topcoder, I want to say that it's not just stuff that anybody can do. Topcoder does very large design and engineering projects, really big ones, like for Facebook or Google. And they have 400,000 engineers working on these projects as their pool. And I was talking with their CEO, and he says he feels like Topcoder is a community that happens to have its own company. But the pace of growth is really phenomenal. And when you talk to this CEO, he thinks, while I think that this peers incorporated model is incredibly important, he thinks that it is everything, that in the future will be all of this. There was this nice line that I want to say I stole from someone, so I didn't make it up myself. But he said, my father had 1 job in his lifetime, I'll have 7 jobs in my lifetime, and my children will have 7 jobs at the same time. And this is the peers incorporated model that's going to be coming into play. Etsy, another company that I love, is another example. And so Etsy is a marketplace of stuff that you've made or curated yourself. And this year will be there. They just had their 7th year anniversary. And this year they'll probably be giving back to the sellers of stuff $700 million. So this, and you can look at the growth curve. I mean, it's really phenomenal what can happen. So needless to say, I'm a business person. And so you look at this and say, I want to do that. I just build my little platform and then zoom. Everyone's going to come and I'm just going to be sitting back. And so let me tell you, it's not quite like that. So as you know, I founded Zipcar, and Zipcar owns its own cars and places them in dense metropolitan areas. And I founded, maybe 15 months ago now, we launched Buzzcar, which is, you guys here will think of relay rides or get around. And this is in France, and it's me renting out my own car to my friends and neighbors. And again, to the difficulty of this model, every single thing you do has to have these 2 places. And so when I talk about insurance, it took me a year to get insurance in France, which is still non-trivial. And the reason why it's so hard is I know that car owners need to be completely protected, that they don't want to have their driving history messed up forever. And yet, as a driver of these cars, what is my goal? I want to have as cheap insurance as possible, and I want to have a really low deductible, whereas the owner doesn't care one bit about the deductible. Like, who in heck would care? So you're constantly having to balance between these 2 sides. You know, on the homepage, who gets what piece of the homepage? When you say anything, who is listening? It's a complicated model. So I want to take you back. As I say, it took me a year to get the insurance, and then there was about 6 months worth of web development, and you have your opening day. And so whenever you're starting a company, I feel like there's this big line of what you think it's going to be, and then you launch, and then you learn a thing or 2. So I want to take you back to that launching date, June 1, a year and a quarter ago. And it was a fabulous day. We had really great press, and so car owners started adding their cars really fast, and drivers started signing up, and then we started having reservations being made, and it was really exciting. So the reservations were going out and saying, you know, Robyn wants to rent your car this weekend, and you get to earn 70 euros. And here was my look of incredible surprise. Like, are you kidding me? And what I found out was about 80% of the owners who had only just signed up couldn't be bothered to answer yes, no, or maybe, like just nothing, silence. And so going back to learning, what did I learn? Industrial production on the quality spectrum, as I say, industrial production, and Zipcar, it says, here is the price value point we're going to give her, and it's going to be consistent and exactly the same each and every time. Whereas with peer production, there's low to high, right? I can provide it anyway. And eBay was the first guys to figure this out because they're the first ones to really get into the peer incorporated model. And so, yeah, we need ratings and we need commentary so we can take all that yuck stuff, stick it to the side, flag it, say don't talk to them. And so just about every peers incorporated model you will see has a whole bunch of these ratings to get this out. So needless to say, it wasn't just, I didn't just have a look of horror on that day. I also, here's, you know what, I'm going to pass these slides. So we've done a whole bunch of stuff to make it easier working on this platform. So we've turned our adding a car kind of into a very graphical, really nice click, click, click. It's really fun to give all those car details. And I also, we did a really beautiful, if I say so myself, a really nice job. It was really fun working with smartphone apps because it is, you know, yeah, data entry, and it turns into a camera in seconds. So we could say, as an owner, take a photo of the four sides of your car, and you just push the button, it says, add photo, and then it just goes in, the front of the car, the sides of the car, and it's really cool how you can turn it from a camera into data input and back. So you're constantly, as you know from an entrepreneurial perspective, improving, improving, improving. So here is my look of delight. So my look of delight was, yeah, all the other things that I expected from the peers incorporated model did happen. And so that has to do with diversity, which is one of the reasons we branded it with Buzzcar, and people get to choose their insect and make their own logo. And here are pictures of owners and their cars. And you will see that we have all different kinds of owners and all different kinds of cars, different price points. And so cool ones, not cool ones, hipsters, proud, and great. So the cars are exactly as we had hoped. And here they are across France. And as I say, I think we're 15 or 16 months in. We have 12,000 people who have signed up and 1,400 cars that have been put into the network across France. So that is what I had been hoping, and that's one of the things that we got out of it. So back to this peer production, I want to take you to the far side, this wow side, because what we find also is that it's not just wow, but it's wow, the amount of innovation that you can have. So going back to the Airbnb, if you think of being, if I'm a big company, maybe I have 10 people in my innovation department. Maybe I'm a really big company, I have 100 people in my innovation department. Airbnb has 650,000 people innovating on its model. So we come to that industrial production where we had the one place where we're delivering. In the peer production model, I have all the stuff that was to the right of that and all this amazing, amazing stuff that can happen. So with Buzzcar, as an example, someone rented a car. And when they picked up the car from the owner, they said, I'm going to this island off the coast of France. And she said, oh, I love that island. If you go here, this side is where all the really beautiful cliffs are. This side is where all the beaches are. This is my favorite beach, and this is the best fish restaurant. And I think, you're not going to get that from Hertz, and you're not going to get that from Zipcar. It's because we're working with individuals that we can have this great localization, customization, and we can move the curve of quality expectation up because we have all these people innovating on it. And for me, this is part of why I'm thrilled with this new thing that's happening. So why we called it Buzzcar, and to remind you yet again that this is a platform for participation, and that there's honey enough for all of us. That, you know, so we have all our worker bees, all those peers who are doing stuff, and they have enough for them, and there's enough for others as well. And I started this talk just briefly alluding to the world's most horrible problems. And in fact, I want to say I am enormously depressed about the fact that not every single person is running around with their hair on fire because of the future that we have ahead of us. And for me, Peers Incorporated is absolutely the model that I think is going to deliver, because we're getting the power of companies and we're combining it with the speed of collective action provided by all these individuals and maintaining the innovation and creativity that individuals bring. And so what we can see is if we can get some of these platforms right, we can move at amazing, amazing speed and scale. And so I have here, of course, transportation at the center of the universe, which, in case you guys didn't know, it is at the center of the universe, so #1 field to be in. The glue that holds everything. But there are all these other really, really pressing things. We see this Peers Incorporated model happening. And I look at edX and the MITx, that is exactly what's happening. A common platform for participation and all these other things. So in water, where is the solution? And these are all the issues that we need to work on. And you have 2 roles to play. You can be the creators of the platforms, and when other platforms are out there and exist, you can be the participators to move things really, really fast. So if I look back at the time and place we're standing in society, we look at the internet, and it has really empowered individuals. And I am so happy. It's one of my top 3. I'll take electricity and as my top 3 fabulous things in the world. The internet is it, and internet has empowered people. But this Peers Incorporated new organizational structure, it's given people not just the power of the internet, but the huge power of a company that companies have to offer, and handed it to individuals. And for me, I think it's really where we're going. So, go. Questions? That's the end of what I have to say. Well, you guys, questions? Yeah.
Question is on trust and sharing, requiring trust. How do you get people to get over that leap of faith, sharing that card to other people who he does not know? And how would you maintain that?
Part of the sharing and trust piece, I think, comes out with the ratings and commentaries, and I think that's one reason why we're seeing so many of these things happening now, because that had to be invented, and we have all the people who are on Facebook, and so the whole social networking thing and the ratings and commentaries has really enabled us to do it. One of the pieces that I really love about Buzzcar, for example, is that I think people are acting even better than they did with Zipcar, because there is manual key exchange still, because I don't want people to have to make an investment to put a box in their car. And so not only are we seeing each other face to face, but then I know that that person is living in my neighborhood, and I'm going to be bumping into them. And I know that the very next person on this car is going to be the person who owns the car. So I think that there's these multiple ways that you get in. And another piece around the Peers Incorporated piece that I really like is that if we think of a pure industrial economy only values things that can be monetized. And so $1 is equal to every other dollar. In the Peers Incorporated model, all of the intangibles are now made apparent and are visible and can be valued as they are appropriately valued. Like, we do value those intangibles, but we don't have to put a price on them, and so they're now seen. So I think that we'll be seeing more and more of this issue around trust, and I think it's something that, yeah, there's going to be anecdotes of badness, but I think we're definitely over that hump. Anything else? Yeah.
Yeah, with these two-sided markets, how did you overcome the user acquisition chicken and egg problem that I assume you faced?
Yeah, the endless question. And I was, it's going to depend on what you're doing. And I was hearing some really nice advice So again, I won't attribute it to me, but I'll say it was really great advice. 2 ways. One is to constrain it geographically if you need localness. So own your local market really well and then expand, so have success. Or own a segment. So I was talking to someone who's doing stuff sharing. There's a whole bunch of people who are trying to do stuff sharing and making it work. And he constrained himself to just cameras. And when he constrained himself just to cameras, he actually quickly could own the camera stuff market and then expand from there. So try to make yourself have a small an area that you can own. And then in the beginning, it's brute force, right? So it's you doing, personally, you and your 3 friends doing as much as you can and then expanding it. Other questions? Yeah?
The Peers Inc. model, you're showing how essentially everything, water, cars, transportation, hotels, you're suggesting there's more value in what we can get from our friends because it incorporates the intangibles. What do you think that happens to the economy in general if we stop doing
I think it's so 2 points for me. One that I want to make, because I didn't make, when I was giving an earlier iteration of this idea, someone said to me, so Robyn, have you become a communist? And like, that's the end. And I'm really liking the iPhone example because I really want my iPhone itself to be built with the industrial economy. That's really important to me, that it is got all the economies of scale built in there, really reliable, dependable, exactly the same, big platform. But all of those apps, that's the peers part, and I want to take advantage of that. 2, what happens, I think no matter what the future holds, we're going to be going into this peers incorporated model, without question, because of all the benefits of localization, lower cost, I'm not having to pay for individuals, and individuals can cobble together their 7 jobs at one time livelihood. So I think that is absolutely without question coming. From a larger societal standpoint, I think it offers up some really, really frightening potential future outcomes. When I was in France with universal health care, the idea that works much better than here in the US, where I'm really concerned. What is going to happen? No one's going to have any health care, and who's paying for that? And so I think when I think about whole tax policies, I think there's a lot of implications around tax policies that we have to resolve, because it's not just health care, which is really critical, but also retirement and infrastructure. So we do need governments to do things, and as I look at it, Airbnb just finally, after a lot of I want to say this is Robyn reading in the press, not Robyn talking to Brian Chesky on this particular comment. In San Francisco, they finally coughed up and agreed to pay the 14% hotel tax. And I think that was completely fair and correct. They are serving as hotels, and that 14% hotel tax is to support the city of San Francisco's infrastructure. And so indeed, they should be paying that. When we come to individuals in France, everything is taxed at a 20% premium as a value-added tax. And for me, it's really too early and should not be taxed as individuals at the 20% hit rate. When Robyn's making $80,000 a year off of my car, which won't be happening, or off of my bed, then start taxing me at a taxable rate. But don't tax my first dollar or my second dollar, because we really need this economy, this peers incorporated and excess capacity to be brought out. And so I think we have to think about our tax policies. And it's something we definitely have to address. And when we don't, which is probably the most likely thing to happen, we're going to have some really dysfunctional things that are going to happen out in the future. Yeah.
Is Buzzcar price competitive with Zipcar, and how do you see them playing together as,
I would say Buzzcar has to be cheaper than Zipcar, and each and every time, because it's not brand new cars. So if you just took a brand new, 50% of Buzzcars are younger than 5 years, and 50% are older than 5 years. But if we had a brand new one, it would be about the same price point. What it does differently is it should be closer, it should be cheaper, and it's local. And when we think about the two Zipcar will only put cars in places where it can get a return on investment, i.e. dense metro areas and university towns. What's been really thrilling for me with Buzzcar is to see transactions happening in places where there would be no way in hell you would put a traditional car rental. And I love saying the word traditional car sharing. Traditional car sharing. So they serve different purposes. Yeah?
Why did you launch Buzzcar in France? Do you think there's an important cultural component in peer sharing?
A question I've been asked and answered now probably 100 times. I launched in France for a couple of reasons. A, I've been working on getting insurance in the US for now close to 5 years, and the companies that you see are stuck out in the West Coast where they had the laws changed. And I've been trying to find out a way where you can do it without changing the laws in the US. So I could do that in France. And in France, I think they're having a national, they don't realize this, but they're having a national transportation conversation. It's been many years where they've had these shared bikes pervasively in many cities. And so they're realizing this access, not ownership. And in Paris itself, they had been discussing for the last 4 years a company called Autolib, which is one-way all-electric vehicles throughout Paris. And it was a national conversation because it was costing, I think it was 50 million euros the first year, and it just launched, and I wanted to be in that conversation as people are thinking, what's the cost of travel? When I come downstairs, which are the ways to travel? And I want to say, sadly, I chose France incredibly well, because over the last 2 years and within 6 months of when I launched, i.e. everyone has been thinking at the same time, 24 peer-to-peer car sharing companies have launched worldwide, and 9 of them in France. So only 2 here in the US. Yes, on the way back.
I would appreciate it if you can please share your Zipcar very early story, like what happened when you had that idea, and then what happened with your seed or angel funding, or your patents filing, or things like that.
Ooh, that's a whole talk. Let me just think of. Okay, since we're at MIT, I'll give you one just amusing anecdote around that sphere. We talked today about doing the minimum viable product, which was not a concept that existed then. We didn't have that little idea. But Zipcar, and I have my next door neighbor here, who thankfully, due to zoning, I was allowed to do. So Zipcar's very first car is beta car, when I had 1 car and 22 users, and it was parked in front of our house. And for this beta month, the key to that car, so people could reserve it online. So they could go reserve Tuesday, 4 to 6. But to get the car, they walked to the house, they walked up the backyard, they walked onto the porch, pulled up the pillow, the key was underneath, and then they got it. And then when we launched, what you could do differently was that if you held a proximity card on the windshield, on the proximity card, the car would open. However, your reservation on the server had nothing to do with the car because we hadn't gotten that connection done yet. People filled out a paper log that was in the glove box. The key that was dangling from the ignition, that key the car would start, because there was no connection. So when we think about a risk scenario, my staff were horrified, but I thought, there's 4 Zipcars in the entire Boston area. Who is thinking that there's going to be a key dangling, and who's going to be breaking into it, and I'm willing to take that risk. So it was 6 months before we had things operating in the technical way that you know. But for consumers, it was just like a black box. And I also didn't say that the proximity card, if you owned that proximity card's card, it would open any Zipcar at any time, any place. It would just open it. But no one had any idea that was the case. And one time I got a telephone call or an email from a guy. We had 1 car in Louisburg Square, one of the first 4 cars. And he sent this email and said, Robyn, I was walking past the Zipcar on Monday at midnight, and someone had left the headlights on. So I opened the car door and turned the headlights off, but don't bill me. And I thought, like I would know? Yeah. So minimum viable product, it's true. Yeah?
Building on the point of bringing public authorities into this collaborative model, do you have any lessons to share on collaborating with public authority?
One of the things about Zipcar was that I didn't need government to do anything for me ever, period. And that's been one of the beautiful things about Zipcar is that we didn't need any help, we just did it ourselves. And curiously, in Europe, when they talk about car sharing, they're saying, yeah, it's going to work in areas where you can get government collaboration. So that was just one nice piece. What happened with Sandy was I had given a piece of this talk that you guys saw around Peers Incorporated, and I had given it on the stage and in a venue with the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Secretary of HUD, and he saw it, and he thought about it, and then when Sandy happened, he called me up. And he said, hey, Robyn, I've been thinking about your talk for the last 2 weeks. This is a fabulous idea. How can you respond? But what I found with working with government, in this circumstances, now I've adapted. But when Obama was elected the first time, I can say that. The first 2 years, I knew a lot of people in government, and I spent a lot of time in Washington trying to influence transportation and internet policy. And what I found is that governments, they have no money, and they move incredibly slowly. And so in this Sandy piece right now, basically, his job was as convener, that he's going to put on the phone all the people that Robyn Chase thinks he should put on the phone together, and then we're going to be on the phone, and he says, nice to hear you guys, I've got to run, and then we chat. So it's working with government and collaborating with government needs to get done, but it is certainly a slow process. So I feel like I've had some really great wins, but it has been, I feel like that's moving planets. So for me, I have 2 phases of my work. One is working on big government policy, and that's the moving planets work. And then the other is doing these startups, which is my own, what I can do in my own control. So it has advantages or disadvantages.
So is the lesson don't collaborate?
No, because I think I've had some significant, the amount of pushing I did in Washington on some issues really changed minds, and they think about things 180 degrees from where they used to think about them. And it took me 2.5 years of pushing hard and feeling like I was getting nowhere, and then suddenly there was an about face, and they all agree with me, and I think that was worthwhile. Yeah?
A lot of the knowledge in the collaborative model, or the peer model, is that you have to have a high value item. So you start with beds, transportation, et cetera. As companies move down the value ladder and venture backers are less willing to back smaller value items, do you think that the pace of scale and innovation can continue?
2 answers to that. One, yes, you're slightly right. And if I think about Zipcar, I used to say that what Zipcar made renting a car as easy and convenient as getting cash from an ATM. And that was a great sentence, and it took me 6 months to come up with it, and I loved it, and the company stuck with it. But today, what I would say is Zipcar made renting a car as easy and convenient as using your own car. And when we think of stuff sharing, we have to make it as easy and convenient as using your own. And part of that, I think marketing has a lot to do with everything. And we undervalue the costs of ownership and storage and buying things. So I go buy the power tool that I'm going to use one time, and then I have to drag it around with me for the next 5 years in boxes and find a place to store it. And I think if we really appreciated that reality, I'm more interested in those other items. So we have to make the cost and benefits different. But I also want to say that I think this Peers Incorporated model is absolutely not just for tangible physical goods. I think it applies in this huge realm of things, and there's a lot of excess capacity to be wrung out of lots of other things. Yeah.
So along with that, it sounds like keeping transaction costs low is key to making it work. Do you have some tips you could share around how to do that with strategies?
My tip is that's why I love a free and open internet. Keep it that way. I mean, it is, and my husband, who was my CTO at Zipcar and has been my CTO all along, he was remarking that launching Buzzcar versus launching Zipcar, there's so much stuff that is now, that there's tools for that we had to build. And so it's just getting easier every day. And another piece of excess capacity that I forgot to mention, another one that's a beautiful example, cloud computing. It was Amazon's Q1 post Q4 server capacity that they turned a cost center into a profit center. So really, it's a great idea. Yeah.
Can you just say a little bit more about the environmental sustainability dimensions of the business model, sort of around ride sharing? What is the impact? Is it just that there's fewer cars being manufactured, and so it's the first cost of the impact of manufacturing? How do you think about that?
So I think you meant to say car sharing. Ride sharing. So with car sharing, what has been delightful about car sharing is there's two impacts. One is each well-shared car, and I'm saying well-shared car because there's a whole bunch of car sharing projects out there, including Buzzcar, that can't lay claim to these statistics because they aren't well-shared. So each well-shared car, which is most of Zipcar's fleet, will replace 15 to 20 cars individually owned because 40% of the people avoid buying or sell their car. And this is a really hard and good statistic because when they quit, we see them come out and they do that. And for each, so if I look at MIT, each Zipcar is replacing 15 to 20 cars and is replacing the associated parking spots. So MIT has had to build, no doubt, at least one parking garage less than they would have. And so I was talking to MIT guys, they've had a huge, since we launched in 2000, they've expanded in many, many ways. They've had many, many more people coming into this campus, but they haven't had to build the associated parking. And from a city perspective, each parking space is used, each car requires 3 parking spaces. So by diminishing each car, so there's this huge win like that. Then the more important piece than that is that each individual driver drives 80% less. And they drive 80% less because they're paying in real time all the costs of car ownership. So I joke that when you own your own car and you say, I want to have some ice cream, you get in your car and you go get ice cream. When you're having a Zipcar and you say, I want to get some ice cream, and you're looking at the $8 an hour, you think, I can drive that, I can eat those old cookies, and I'll go buy ice cream on my way home from work tomorrow. Like, you totally transform how you're going to do it. And I'm looking at the clock, and you guys all have to go. It was a pleasure. Thank you.